When I was 16, my friend had told me one of her boyfriend's friends liked me. I asked which one, and she said Austin. I said that I would be okay with her giving him my number. She did, and a week later, he became my boyfriend. There was nothing out of the ordinary at first. He seemed like a nice guy, and I felt like I could trust him. Fast forward to a week later, I was at his house, and he wanted to make out with me. I said no because we were in the middle of a video game. He got mad at me and started to have a meltdown. He dragged me upstairs by my hair, and I couldn't fight him. Once upstairs, he began to abuse me. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I kept getting abused for a year and a half because I was too scared to leave. Finally I did, and then I found out some pretty weird stuff about him. I had heard from a friend of his back from his hometown that he had planted a bomb in his school and then tried to light himself on fire. Plus, he had been institutionalized more than once. Okay, major red flags, and I wish I would have known that a lot sooner. I graduated high school early, and then moved out of town and started going to college. I had Austin blocked from everything. Phone, Facebook, Twitter, basically any social media site he was on, I blocked him. Not even a month into college, I kept getting these calls and texts from numbers I didn't know. It was him. I had to constantly block numbers. I was getting tired of it, so I answered one. He was asking which dorm I lived in because he was on campus and wanted to see me. I threatened to get security and the police if he did not leave. He hung up. I had gone home that weekend, and then there was a knock on the door. I answered it, and it was him. He was holding a coffee cup and smiling at me. He tried handing me the coffee and told me it was my favorite kind. He was right. It was my regular order at the local coffee shop. I asked him how he knew that, and he confessed that he'd been watching me when I go there. I quickly shut the door and called the police and told him what I was doing. He left, but when I went back outside, the coffee cup was right next to my car. The thing is, I don't know how he got my address. None of my friends ever gave it to him, and I sure as hell did not. Fast forward to right before my 18th birthday, I was in a musical at my college, and I had been advertising it on my Facebook, so friends and family knew when it was. After our Saturday show, I had gotten a text from an unknown number that said, "Thanks for making me laugh. You did really good tonight. A-." I lost it. I showed one of the girls in the show with me, and she got security to walk me back to my dorm. A few weeks later, I found out that he had bought me birthday presents and wanted me to come get them from his house. I told him no, and he kept bothering me about it. Yet again, he ended up showing up at my house when I was home. It was about 11:30 at night, and I heard tapping noises at the window. I thought it was the wind making a branch hit the window, so I thought nothing of it. Probably about 10 minutes later, I heard whispering outside. I opened my blinds, and he was standing there. I froze and shut the blinds. I called the police again, and when I got off the phone, went back to the window and told him the police were coming, and that if I ever saw him again, I would get a restraining order. To this day, that was the last time I saw him. So Austin, let's never meet again. This story takes place, I'd say 2009 to sometime in 2010. He isn't actually my ex, but at the time, he was in a relationship with my best friend. Things were fine at first. They talked on the phone a lot, as well as us hanging out in one big group pretty often. I was seeing one of his friends at the time, and we weren't really into the hanging out alone stages yet, so mostly we would just all hang out together. There were a lot of good memories from that time, but it was around the point that we started to drift off into the more alone time and less group time. Then things started to go bad. For one, the guy always scared me. I'd never admit it, and definitely not to his face, but he was intimidating. A little while after, he and my friend started going out. He told me he was going to punch me in the face if I didn't stop looking at him, and ever since then, he'd kind of put the fear of God in me. but as much as he scared me, I hated him more. The first time he ever hit her, she called me crying her eyes out. He'd kicked her off of him into his dresser, and she didn't know what to do. But of course, as with all abusive relationships, that was hardly the end of it. Certain parts of their relationship were good, certain parts were bad, but he always swore up and down he was sorry and loved her. Somehow, he always managed to talk her into coming back, even when they did break up. Our other friends and I started to notice bruises all over her. Ones she'd tell us were from play fighting, but if that was really the case, he had to have been playing pretty rough with her nonetheless. When she wanted to go out and hang out with the rest of us, he'd hold her down on the ground and refuse to let her leave. For hours. Eventually she'd cave in and stay with him, and he'd finally let her up. Once when we were all at his house, he punched right through a radio and scared the crap out of all of us. Another night, I had to sit there and watch the two of them nearly get into a fist fight right there on the street. When I think back to it all, I really wish I would have dropped the ruse of support a friend and told her flat out that he was scum. My disapproval was always known, but mostly stayed silent about it. It wasn't like I could change her mind anyway, but I still wish I had done more. One night, a number I didn't recognize called the house, and I picked up to find that it was him on the other line. He told me she was in the hospital because she accidentally hit her abdomen off his dresser and her spleen burst. The bullshit excuse and the tone of his voice sold out his lies pretty quick, but I didn't flat out accuse him, but everyone, nurses, doctors, her family, her friends, everyone had their suspicions. It was him. Who did it? I never confronted her, but I still knew. I just figured she'd tell me when she was ready. 6 or so months after the fact, she finally did. They'd been wrestling, he'd gotten mad, and he shoved her into the dresser.